Awesome.
Welcome to our online audience. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. This is the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for District Attorney, Colorado Judicial District 4. I am your host, Shelley Rohrs, spokesperson for the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region. Again, thank you for joining us. We are coming to you live from IBEW Local 113, a great facility. We were just here this morning for our ballot issues, so thank you so much for having us. Our candidates joining us today are candidate Michael J. Allen and candidate Jeremy Dowell. So thank you both for joining us. Your moderators for this afternoon's forum are Mike Williams with Citizens Project and Candace Lehman with AARP. So I'm going to turn it over to your moderators. It's all yours for introductions.
Oh, you're going to let me go first. Thank you. I'm Candace Lehman. I'm a member of and past president of the local AARP chapter 1100 in Black Forest. The chapter is over 50 years old. We have a good number of people. We do public service and we have speakers once a month. The second Wednesday of the month at the Black Forest Lutheran Church, we meet. So if you guys are interested and want to come out and have a lunch with us, please do.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Williams. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Project. We do equity, inclusion, and justice work with a primary focus on civic engagement. So thank you all for being civically engaged.
Okay, on to your candidate questions. Each candidate was given these questions ahead of time by our League of Women Voters to prepare a 1-minute answer. So I believe, oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Who are you?
Right? Introductions. I'm so sorry.
I was going to ask if you were going to get our intros.
You are. 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes each, sir. And I believe, candidate Allen, you are the first one to go.
Okay.
I believe.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for setting this up and organizing everything. And it's no small task to get something like this established and to draw people out, and you did a great job with that. Also want to thank IBEW for hosting this event here in this building. My name is Michael Allen. I'm the elected DA. I've been in prosecution for 20 years. But I want to talk a little bit more about my background. I am a Colorado native. I grew up in the Denver area, graduated from Arvada West, and was not really in a financial position to go off straight to college, so I joined the Navy. I served in the Navy for 8 years as an aviation electronics technician, repairing F-18 radar systems. And then when I got out, I was able to use my GI Bill to go to the University of Northern Colorado up in Greeley and then on to law school at the University of Kansas, where I started my prosecution career. As a prosecutor, I've been able to prosecute every level of case, from the lowest level traffic cases all the way up to the most heinous multiple victim homicide cases. And it's something that has given me a great deal of satisfaction in the job. It's a very tangible way that I get to serve our community. My wife and my 2 sons are here. Heidi and I have been married for 29 years. It'll be 30 years this coming January. And then I've got 2 sons. David is our oldest. He's a teacher teaching middle school history. And our youngest is in the United States Navy currently serving and actually just got back from deployment. And I think it's a testament to the values that Heidi and I gave to the boys, that they're both in some form of public service, sort of following in the footsteps that both of us have established. I just want to again thank everybody for being here today. This is really how we engage in civil discourse and learn about candidates. And again, I've been the elected DA for the last 4 years essentially, and I've been in prosecution for 20 years. I'd be humbled to have your support again for another 4 years as district attorney of the greatest judicial district in the state of Colorado, and that is the 4th Judicial, representing El Paso and Teller counties. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. I'm told I'm supposed to develop an elevator speech. Those who know me well know that I don't really care for political theater. And that can sometimes run at odds with being a candidate. I mean, the conventional wisdom is that it's all about political theater, and I don't agree with that. If you Google my name, Google will show at some point there that they describe me as a politician. And I'm not super comfortable with that. I don't really have a problem with politicians because our country needs people to step up and run for public office, and that, I guess, makes them a politician. But the political theater side of this is not something I've ever grown comfortable with. So I'm just going to give a kind of a non-political answer to my introduction. I'm sometimes asked, why do I want to be DA? The truth is, I've never wanted to be DA. I don't even want to be a DA now, but I do want the DA's office to have a different direction. I have a different vision for what the DA's office can and should be. I believe it should be broader than it currently is. And, you know, I'm the only one that was willing to step up in the last 35 years and articulate the case for a different direction for the DA's office. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm running. I would love to have your support, and we'll move the DA's office in a different direction.
Okay, thank you guys. We appreciate it. Thank you, candidates. So we alternate which candidate gives the first answer to the question. Candidate Dell, we will start with you, and your time begins when I finish the question, followed by candidate Allen. First question, what is the most difficult, rewarding thing you have accomplished professionally?
Yeah, this question is something that that I really appreciated, because in my day job, I'm an attorney that works with kids that have been charged with crimes, acts of delinquency. It would be a crime if they're an adult, but it's an act of delinquency if they're a kid. And every one of these kids, every client I've ever had, every kid I've ever met as part of doing this job for the last 6 years has been failed by the system repeatedly. Most of them are carrying substantial trauma from difficult issues they've faced. And so I think the most difficult and the most rewarding thing I do is whenever I can get one of my teenage clients to trust me, that I can try to make their lives a little bit better, try to get them on a different path, move them into a different direction, and maybe also along the way address some of the systemic failures that they've been struggling with at no fault of their own.
Thank you. Candidate Allen?
Thank you, ma'am. I would say the most rewarding thing that I've been able to participate in is doing the job of district attorney. I get to engage with people that I would have never dreamed I would be able to engage with, including up to the Attorney General for the state of Colorado, the governor of the state of Colorado, working on public policy and standing up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. You know, as a young person, I grew up in a pretty disadvantaged situation, single mother in low-income housing in the North Denver area. And as a young kid, I remember coming home one day and our front door had been kicked in and our home had been burglarized. And nobody was ever caught for that or prosecuted for that, but it gave me a very indelible feeling of what it feels like to be a victim, to have your home invaded by somebody else. And I take that with me every single day in this job as a prosecutor. And that's ultimately what the district attorney's office is tasked with doing, and that is prosecuting violations of the law, standing up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. And when you stand up for a victim who either can't or won't stand up for themselves and you get a guilty verdict, it's a feeling that is unmatched in my career.
Thank you. Thank you both. The next question, we're going to start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dow. Describe a law that impacts your job that needs to be updated or streamlined, and that's 1 minute.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. You know, this is an area that I've been fighting for a long time now. The idea that violent criminals have access to firearms and are able to carry out violent acts in our community. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I believe that law-abiding citizens should have and should be protected to own firearms. But when a person commits violent acts, they are forfeiting their right to carry a firearm or to have access to firearms. And the law has been watered down to the point in Colorado that people that engage in and are convicted of motor vehicle theft and drug distribution now can currently legally possess firearms. I can tell you, over 20 years of prosecution, drug distribution is a violent offense. I've prosecuted many homicide cases where either the drug dealer or the drug buyer carries a firearm into that transaction and ends up killing the other party to get the money or drugs or what have you. So the idea that these violent criminals can lawfully possess firearms is something that needs to change. I've testified against it in the legislature, and we need to change that.
Thank you, candidate Dow.
Thank you. Doing the job that I do, working with teenagers that have been accused of crimes, the school districts will often respond in a way that is not productive to disrupting the school to prison pipeline that they're very well aware of. And I think that there needs to be more due process added into the process that school districts follow in order to expel kids and take them out of school before they've even been convicted of anything. And so the DA's office plays a role in that if the DA's office charges too aggressively children that have been accused of a crime, then the school districts have no choice but to expel. And so the DA's office needs to stop charging as aggressively as they are some of these kids that actually are not guilty of what they're being accused of.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is for candidate Dowell to start. Do you believe that people of color in your district are disproportionately incarcerated? This is 1 minute.
Yes, this is a nationwide problem, and our district is no different. It's something like a person of color is 5 times more likely to end up in jail or prison, and this is a legacy of our country's history. It's a problem of systemic racism, and it absolutely needs to be disrupted. DA's office can play a very aggressive role in that, in collecting the data, and then working on addressing that problem specifically.
Thank you. Candidate Allen?
You know, one thing that I think everybody in the DA's office under my leadership follows is the idea put forth by Martin Luther King Jr., and that is the time is always right to do what is right, and that's what we carry forward into the courthouse every single day. The premise of this question, I think, is sort of takes us down a path that's not accurate. When you look at socioeconomic impacts on the criminal justice system, if you look at poor areas that maybe are more ethnically diverse, those people are victimized at a higher rate than other parts of the community. And so when you start changing the way you prosecute crimes just because of skin color or socioeconomic impact, then you're automatically discounting what the impact is on victim groups in those areas. So when you look at poor areas of Colorado Springs, for instance, the southeast part of the city has higher crime rates. It's also more ethnically diverse. And those people deserve justice just like any other person in this community, and we stand up for them every single day in the DA's office.
Thank you. This next question, we're going to start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dowell. Can you describe a time when you had to make a decision that may have been unpopular but was necessary to uphold ethical principles?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what we do every single day in the DA's office. As a younger prosecutor, I went out on a homicide call, and our prosecutors and investigators go out on homicide calls every single time that one occurs in the 4th Judicial. And it was very clear that a murder had occurred, but there was not enough evidence to really point and identify one of 3 persons as being responsible for that homicide. And so you have to make a really tough decision when you don't have the evidence to file charges against somebody. Even in the case of murder, you have to ethically not file that murder case. And so that means that in that particular instance, because of the lack of evidence that was gathered during the investigation, there's no ability to prosecute that case. And then that deprives justice to a victim, but it's the right thing to do from a prosecutor standpoint. When you are a prosecutor, you have to follow the Constitution, you have to follow the law, and we do that every single day in the DA's office, whether that means filing charges or not filing charges as the law and the evidence suggests.
Thank you. Candidate Dowell.
In law school, I was an intern for the district attorney's office in Maine, where I went to law school, in Cumberland County. And the culture of that particular district attorney's office was very aggressive and from my point of view, really railroading people. And when I brought that to the attention, it was a competitive internship. I had to work hard to get it. There was a lot of people that were passed over for me to get that job. And there was some pressure, you know, from my peers and from law school professors and so on to stay it out, stick it out. And I took my concerns to the leadership of that office. They were ignored, and so I resigned. And I think that that's necessary to do whenever you cannot be a cog in a machine that is railroading people and not respecting their rights.
Thank you, gentlemen. Candidate Dowell, how do you balance civil rights with public safety? This is 1 minute.
I mean, the short answer is that you have to take innocent until proven guilty seriously. I think the DA's office should not be out in the media trying the case in the court of public opinion. Every person that's accused of a crime needs to be given the constitutional rights and take the principle of innocent until proven guilty seriously. And so if, as Mr. Allen was saying, if the evidence isn't there, then you can't move forward with a case, even if it would be politically expedient to do that.
Thank you, Candidate Allen.
Thank you. So this really strikes to the heart of what it means to be an American. We have a justice system in the United States that is unmatched by any other justice system in the entire world. It's something that I'm proud to be a part of, and it's something that is guided by what our forefathers created when they wrote the Constitution and passed the Bill of Rights. If we follow the Bill of Rights and we follow the law as established here in Colorado and in the United States Constitution, and then our ethics guidelines that guide us in our practice of law, then you're going to, by design, be ethical in the way that you're meting out justice to the community, to victims, and to defendants. You know, a prosecutor, people don't realize this, but a prosecutor is the only person in the courtroom that represents every single person in that courtroom. When I stand up in court and I represent, I announce that I am Michael Allen representing the people of the state of Colorado. And that includes the defendant themselves. And so you have to follow and make sure that their constitutional rights are protected through that process as well.
Thank you. That ends our prepared questions, and the rest of these questions start the audience-driven questions. So this question, we're going to start off with Candidate Allen. It's going to be 1 minute, followed by Candidate Dow. Please describe your general approach to prosecution.
Yeah, the general approach to prosecution for me is that, again, I've said it several times, but you have to follow the law. People don't realize that the DA's office, prosecutors, the DA, we are the executive branch of government. We are sworn to uphold the laws that are passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. We don't get to pick and choose those laws. So when laws are passed that I don't necessarily agree with, I don't have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm not going to follow that particular law. So again, it comes back to the idea of following the law and then following the evidence and applying it to the situation and determining what should happen with a particular given case. Sometimes it means that you are giving people second chances if they deserve it. And we do a lot of that in the DA's office. We've got really strong juvenile and adult diversion programs. We've got problem-solving courts that do fantastic jobs giving people resources and connections to allow them to overcome whatever issues they may be facing, whether it's addiction or something else. And then other times, when somebody deserves to get the hammer, we're happy to give them that as well and put them in prison if they belong there.
Thank you, Candidate Dow.
This gets to what I was speaking about in my introduction. I think the DA's office really needs to have a broader approach to its primary mandate, which is to always pursue justice. And from my point of view, the number one way you can start with that is by working with community leaders to reduce the causes of crime. The DA's office is positioned better than just about anybody else to accumulate the data of what is driving crime in our community, and then work with community leaders to get in the way and disrupt that crime. Secondly, aggressively pursue all alternatives to traditional prosecution instead of just throwing the book at people. Problem-solving courts need to be maximalized. The resources for those problem-solving courts need to be brought to virtually every case type. And I think that really dig into getting in disrupting the cycle of crime that happens in our community. And then finally, working with people that are re-entering our community after serving a sentence through a recidivism program. And I think that's how the DA's office could be more broad.
Thank you. This is the next question. Candidate Dow will start. We'll give you a minute. What is your ideal balance between deterrence, punishment, and rehabilitation in our justice system? And what policies would you favor to achieve that balance?
Ideally, what we would do
We're going to go with 90. This is a long one. We'll let
okay,
you
thank you.
expound
Yeah.
some
And
more.
if I miss a piece of the question, feel free to
Oh, no.
revisit it with me. But I really believe that every time a crime is committed, and it's not just my belief, it's a reality. Every time a crime is committed, somebody's been victimized. So one of the major priorities of the DA's office should be working with community leaders to stop a crime from being committed in the first place. And unfortunately, in El Paso County, we lead the state in sending people to prison, but then in also sending people back to prison, which means we have a recidivism problem. So more people are being impacted by someone who's recommitting offenses after they come back into our community. So in order to To stop that cycle, we need to address it before it begins by working with community leaders to address the root causes of crime, and then working with the problem-solving court approach to address issues of mental health and addiction that drive the vast majority of crimes, and give people the help they need to stop that cycle. And then finally, when someone's coming back from prison, we need to give them some help to reintegrate into our community, get a job, and they've already served their time. So it's time to get them back on the right track and prevent that problem of recidivism from rearing its ugly head.
Thank you. Candidate Allen.
Would you mind repeating that question?
Sure, it's a long one, so
It
give me a
is.
second here. What is your ideal balance between deterrence, punishment, and rehabilitation in our justice system? And what policies would you favor to achieve that balance?
Perfect. Thank you for rereading that question for me. So ultimately, it comes down to a lot of the things that we're already doing in the DA's office. Prior to me being elected, we had a ton of data in the office, but it was not really harnessed in any way. So when I first started out, I started an intelligence-driven prosecution model, which is looking at the data that's piling up in the office and looking at crime trends and how do we allocate resources within the office towards those dynamic changes. And we've been really effective at doing that. One area that we've seen most recently is rising juvenile crime, and not just rising juvenile crime as far as stealing things or the traditional things that young kids might get involved with. I'm talking about violent crime, shootings, drive-by shootings, motor vehicle theft, all kinds of really bad behavior, and it's really putting our community at risk. There's a particular case out east where over 100 rounds were fired between a group of people, and multiple people were hit with bullets. That tells you that juvenile crime is out of control, and so we have then allocated resources within the office to deal with those rising numbers. We've augmented our juvenile prosecution unit from 3 prosecutors up to 5. And then I also want to point out the idea that our budget is what it is. It's almost $21 million, but do you know that 90 to 95% of that budget is all salary based? When we start talking about the idea of turning the DA's office into a social justice program, the budget for the DA's office is going to skyrocket, and ultimately that means you all are going to have to pay higher taxes.
Thank you. This next question will be 1 minute, and we'll start with candidate Allen. Tell us how you approach programs that embody principles of restorative justice.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have restorative justice in the office. It's good for some types of cases and not good for other types of cases. So restorative justice, as it relates to our office, is the neighborhood justice program. It's a mediation program where you put the offender across the table from the victim, and there's a mediator in the room, and they talk about the impacts of it, what might have caused whatever the dispute might be, and then you come to an agreeable resolution through that. But I can tell you there are certain types of cases that are absolutely not right for restorative justice. That would be domestic violence, would be one of those. You can imagine a power and control situation where a loved one is using power and control to get activity out of the other person. It would be absolutely wrong to put that victim across the table from somebody who has that sort of control over them and expect a just outcome through restorative justice. Sex assault is another one that would be absolutely wrong for restorative justice. Homicide would be another that would be absolutely wrong for restorative justice. So it's a good tool. It's a good tool for the right types of cases, but we're absolutely never going to expand restorative justice to all types of cases because that would be wrong towards victims.
Thank you. Candidate Dow.
I absolutely believe that restorative justice programs produce better outcomes when they're screened appropriately for the appropriateness of using that particular model. So I would maximize the DA's resources to expanding those programs to their fullest extent. And that includes problem-solving courts, which, they're a little bit different than restorative justice. Restorative justice is outside of the court system. Problem-solving courts are inside of the court system. But those same principles overlap and absolutely need to be applied in as many cases as possible. And so I would aggressively screen cases in the DA's office for inclusion in those sorts of programs. My background is that I was working as a problem-solving court coordinator for the Judicial Department before becoming a guardian ad litem in this community. And that's where I learned the power of collaboration and intelligent interventions to disrupt the cycle of crime.
Thank you, gentlemen. This one, we'll start with candidate Dowell again, and this is 1 minute. How would you handle a situation if a subordinate was believed to have committed a crime?
Well, I suppose if a subordinate was believed to have been committed a crime, I would handle it like I would handle all the other cases, which is have law enforcement look into it and make sure that they're collecting the appropriate amount of evidence. And if that subordinate, if the evidence points in the direction of that subordinate having been involved in a crime, then they would absolutely be removed from their position.
Thank you. Candidate Allen?
Yeah, thank you so much. So really it comes down to how we're guided through HR principles. When somebody is accused or thought to have committed a crime, you have to, first of all, put the person on admin leave most likely and separate them from the workplace, do an HR investigation, make sure that their employment status is being looked at, but also looking at how is that case going to be investigated, whether it's going to be investigated by a local agency or looking at is there a conflict of interest for the local agency to do that investigation, and then reaching out to another agency to actually dig into that. And we've actually had that come up in our office on occasion, not very often thankfully, but it has come up, and we've handled those just as I described. And then when somebody needs to be prosecuted, if they were in our office before, then we're happy to either handle that prosecution if there's no conflict, or work closely with another DA's office to hand it off to them to make sure that there's no impropriety in the prosecution effort as well. So that's how you handle those things, and we've done that very successfully during my term as district attorney.
Thank you. This next question, after this, we're going to take a brief break. But Proposition, what are your thoughts? And we're going to start with Candidate Allen first, then Candidate Dow. What are your thoughts around Proposition 128? And that's going to be 1 minute.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Prop 128 is on your ballot. And has anybody here ever heard of truth in sentencing? And none of you should raise your hand, because in Colorado we don't have truth in sentencing. And that's what Prop 128 is all about. So essentially what it says is that if somebody is convicted of murder in the second degree, sexual assault, kidnapping, arson in the first degree, so these are high-level offenses but short of first-degree murder. Currently in the state of Colorado, those types of sentences, you are going to have a defendant serve about a little bit less than 50% of that sentence. So on a murder in the second degree, the max you could get is 48 years. That person would be eligible for parole at about 20 to 22 years. And so that's where we say there's no such thing as truth in sentencing in the state of Colorado. When you get a sentence from the judge and it says 48 years, but you know that's going to really be down to about 20, that's not truth. And that is a disservice to victims. This would reverse that and fix that loophole. This will require those types of defendants to serve 85% of their sentence before parole eligibility, and that would be a good thing for the state of Colorado.
Thank you. Candidate Dow?
Well, I disagree with the idea of tying the hands of people that are working with someone who's serving out a prison sentence that would be in a position to determine whether they have taken the sufficient steps to, rehabilitate and pay for what they've done. People in that position are going to be coming back into our community, and if we're going to take the notion of recidivism seriously, we have to take it seriously both in prison and out of prison. And tying the hands of the people that are working with them to get them back on track, to interrupt some of the cycles that they themselves have been through, whether it's substance abuse or their mental health issues that they're struggling with, to release them when it is appropriate to do so. And the people that are working with them inside the prison are in better position to make that determination. And artificially and arbitrarily tying the hands of those folks would lead to worse outcomes. And prison is the most expensive thing that we can do in the criminal justice system, and we pay for it a lot in taxes.
Thank you, candidates. Don't go away on our online audience. We have more questions and answers coming up. We're just going to give our candidates a short break as we introduce our co-sponsors. Our media sponsors are Studio 809 Podcast and Longmire Audio Engineering, bringing our sound and visuals for today's forum. KOAA Channel 5 and KRCC Public Radio. Our other co-sponsors, AARP, Black and Latino Leadership Coalition, Citizens Project, Colorado Latinos Vote, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Latina Equity Foundation, NAACP Colorado Springs, Neighbors for Education, Pikes Peak Diversity Council, Special Kids Special Families, Together Colorado, Colorado Springs Faith Table. And of course, thank you to our venue host today, IBEW Local 113. A couple of things for the League. Tomorrow is our 4th Discourse and Dogs. If you do not know this, we get together once a month on the 3rd Sunday. And because we're kind of going into the winter months, tomorrow is 3 p.m. at Bear Creek, literally right down the road. So if you have a dog, and if it's your birthday in October, we are now going to start celebrating birthdays. So we have a little special gift for you from the League. If you are available tomorrow at 3 p.m., we're just going to meet there at the main entrance at Bear Creek. Again, the 3rd Sunday every month, Discourse and Dogs. It's just a nice time for us to get together and have some civil conversation. You should also already have your blue book and your ballot. If not, please contact the elections department. Making Democracy Work podcast with all of our candidate interviews. Most of the candidates, both of you have both been interviewed, so you can check out candidate interviews with additional questions. All of our candidate forums, our community conversations, and much more. Also, again, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, right? So please donate if you are able to. And then please become a member of our organization. We are a grassroots organization. Student members are free if you're a student. And otherwise, other than that, candidates, are you ready for the next question? I don't think there are any elected officials in the room, so I'm skipping that one.
We do have one.
Oh,
We have our treasurer here.
I'm sorry. My apologies, Mr. Browerman. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. Our El Paso County Treasurer is here. Thank you. All right, back to your candidates. Thank you so
Right.
much.
We will start with candidate Dowell, 1 minute. What would you do for the victims of crime?
In my position as GAL, I frequently work with victims of crimes because sometimes, and frequently actually, the kids that I'm representing are struggling with mental health abuse or mental health issues and sometimes mental health abuse issues where they have lashed out and victimized members of their own home. So it needs to be taken very seriously. I work with the families. I try to resolve the conflict in the home. I sit in their living rooms and listen to them talk about the issues that gave rise to the incident that brought me into their lives. Ultimately, the victims of crimes need to be given the resources of the support of the DA's office. They do have victims advocates. Frequently, the people I work with feel like the DA's office ignores them whenever they say that the court system and being involved in the judicial system is not actually helping their family move forward. And so I think ultimately you have to listen to victims. You have to provide them with the resources and the therapy and point them in the direction of community resources to help them get back some semblance of normalcy in their lives.
Thank you. Candidate Allen?
Thank you. Ultimately, it comes down to the Victims' Rights Act, which is law in the state of Colorado, requires us to make sure that the victim is a meaningful participant in the prosecution effort. That means they have to be notified appropriately of different types of hearings, given a chance to voice their opinion about different things to the judge, and we do that every single day on all of our cases. One thing that I think people don't necessarily understand is that when a homicide case has happened, you are dealing oftentimes with more than one victim. Obviously, the decedent is no longer with us, but now you've got a family that you're serving. And making sure that their rights are represented through that process is paramount. You have to make sure that you're giving them as much information as you possibly can, including potential outcomes and a voice in that process to achieve justice for the victim. And in fact, one of our prosecutors is here today, just achieved a really great conviction on a first-degree murder case, and a really evil doer is now going to serve the rest of his life behind bars thanks to his efforts and the work of his victim advocate team.
Thank you. The next question will be 1 minute. We'll start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dowell. What are your thoughts on sentencing data being available to the public?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And in fact, it falls right in line with our intelligence-driven prosecution unit. For too long, the criminal justice system has been opaque at best, meaning that citizens can't see what's happening in the criminal justice system. So when I came in as DA, I wanted to change that, and so we started our transparency effort. And you can go on our webpage right now, or you can go on our webpage at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you'll be able to see up-to-date data every single minute of every single day, and it replicates in live time, seeing what's happening with different types of cases, where those cases are, what kind of sentences are the outcome of that. And that's really something that's unique to the state of Colorado and really prosecution across the country. You're seeing some other DA's offices now launching their data efforts as well, but we were the first in Colorado to launch our data effort here in the 4th Judicial District. And it increases that transparency. To have faith in a system, I think you need to increase transparency, and I'm all about that where we can. But there's always going to be tension. There are some things to protect people's constitutional rights. We're going to have to be careful about releasing information until a case is resolved.
Thank you. Candidate Dow.
Sentencing data in the aggregate is absolutely vital to making sure that the DA's office is addressing some of the issues that we talked about earlier, specifically systemic racism. And I think the DA's office not only should release the data, but then also summarize it and make it more digestible for everybody, and then be open and honest whenever a disparity in sentencing is highlighted, and make sure that everybody's aware of it and hold themselves accountable for it.
Thank you. We're going to start with Candidate Dow on this question for 1 minute. What type of people do you work best with, or would you have trouble working with?
I work best with people who are willing to check their ego at the door. When I worked in the problem-solving court system, it's all about collaboration. The chief judge of the district I worked in was in those meetings with us. We had mental health experts in the room, public defender, the assistant district attorney was in there, and we all worked very well together because none of us came in believing we had every answer to every question that came before us. So I do not work well with people who are unwilling to check their ego at the door. And I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Well, thank you. Candidate Allen?
Thank you. I think it's important as a leader to bring in lots of smart people and hopefully people that are smarter than the leader, because ultimately, as the district attorney, I rely on those people to give me good information, to help me iron out different wrinkles in a particular scenario to make good decisions. One area that we have to really dig in on is officer-involved shootings, and that requires getting input from a law enforcement agency, from our own investigation team within the DA's office and the attorney assigned, and then myself and my assistant DA, who's also here in the room, really draw out questions from that team to make sure that we're making the best decision possible. And so it's that willingness to serve the public that I look forward the most. We've got a really diverse team in the DA's office. I've hired attorneys from 33 out of 50 states, and that just tells you the diversity of thought that exists within the DA's office. And that experience and that knowledge and that intelligence is really what I like to draw out of people and help me make the best decision possible for our community that we serve.
Thank you. Next question, we're going to start with Candidate Allen, followed by Candidate Dow. It'll be 1 minute. What is your position on judicial activism?
Yeah, so I'm not sure necessarily what that entails, but I can tell you that just like the way I described the DA being part of the executive branch and that we're sworn to uphold the laws that are passed by the legislature and then the facts of a given case, judges should also follow the law that's passed by the legislature. That's why there's a separation of powers in the United States. So judges that do things that are outside the law are problematic. We actually had a judge here who refused to follow the law as it relates to sentencing sex offenders a few years back. And what that does is actually put our community at risk because they are putting their own opinions in place of the law that was passed by the people, by the legislature, and signed into law by the governor. And when you start to do that, you are sort of acting as if you know better than lots of other intelligent people that engage in that process. It's a wrong way to act as a judge. It does the community a disservice and should be frowned upon every single time.
Thank you. Candidate Dow.
Both at the DA's office and in the Judicial Department, any sort of political interference with outcomes is unacceptable. So judges have to follow the law, they have to follow the evidence, and their own personal opinions, political or otherwise, about how that should go it should not be a factor. Everybody's human, but they need to make they need to take every step imaginable to put a firewall between themselves and the decisions that they're making. And I believe the DA's office also has to do that. And so there's a political side to getting elected to the position of DA, but public confidence is severely undermined whenever it is perceived that the district attorney's office is acting in a political way.
Thank you. We're going to start with Candidate Dow on this one for 1 minute. What historical figure influences how you make legal decisions the most?
The one that just jumps to mind is, I guess, Abraham Lincoln, because he was tough, faced with some of the toughest decisions that we can imagine, and had to make compromises, had to work tirelessly and collaborate. So I guess that's who leaps to mind. I have a lot of respect for the position he was in and the decisions he had to make.
Thank you. Candidate Allen?
Thank you. I made reference to this a little while ago in, I think, one of my opening statements. That would be, for me, Martin Luther King Jr. The civil rights struggle that he was a leading voice in, and the work that he did to right injustice in the United States as it relates to all kinds of aspects of our society were something that was needed. It was sort of working hard to shed everything that followed after the Civil War. And when you look at his statements and some of his speeches, it really highlights, for me, what is the most important about my job, especially that quote that I gave you just a moment ago, which is, the time is always right to do what is right. If we all take that mantra and put it forward into action, I think our community, our society, our nation would be in much better position than it is today. We would have much less division and probably be a stronger nation than we have been over the last several years with the extreme division that's existed.
Thank you. This question will start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dowell. It's going to be 30 seconds. How should citizens evaluate the performance of their district attorney?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to looking at what we're doing and how we are handling the job of prosecution. The DA's office is established by the Colorado Constitution and Colorado statute, and we are tasked with prosecuting violations of criminal law. That means that sometimes we have to give people second chances, or we should give people second chances when they deserve it. So if you have a first-time offender on a low-level offense, how do we steer them away from being embedded in the criminal justice system for the rest of their life? And we do that through our diversion programs. You also have to look at, are we upholding victims' rights? And we do that second to none here in the state of Colorado. We achieve more restitution for victims than any other DA's office in the state of Colorado. We
Thank you,
hand out.
candidate Allen.
Oh, that time went quick.
Yeah, that was a little bit quick.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Same question, candidate Dowell.
I'll keep it short. I think recidivism needs to be front and center. If we're sending people to prison and then bring them back into our community and then they're committing more crimes, then we're not doing everything we can to intervene in that.
All right, thank you very much. We'll start with candidate Dowell on this one. It's 1 minute. What is the biggest difference between you and your opponent?
I think the biggest difference really is I have a different vision for what the DA's office can and should be. And as I've talked about, I believe that the DA's office can play a more proactive role rather than reactive. Prosecution is inherently reactive. So the task forces that Mr. Allen is talking about are reactive. There's a victim every time a crime has been committed, and the DA's office is very well positioned to dig into the data and then work with community leaders to do something about the drivers of crime before they result in a victim. And then I appreciate Mr. Allen's support for some of the problem-solving courts. I think that those resources need to be maximalized to the fullest extent, and if the court system isn't working with him, then he can run it in his own shop as a diversion program, or the DA's office could do that. And then lastly, that recidivism issue, we need to work better with people that are coming out of prison and reintegrating into our community to give them an opportunity to get back on track.
All right, thank you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Ultimately, it comes down to experience. I'm not going to, talk in a negative way about Jeremy. I applaud him for running for district attorney. I applaud him for taking that step and putting himself through it. It's not always fun to be a candidate for elected office, and him running has actually given me the opportunity to talk to more people about the great work being done by the DA's office. Ultimately, though, it comes down to experience. This is a big office. In fact, it's what I call the largest law firm in Southern Colorado. We've got 92 attorneys, 257 total employees, and I've been blessed to be able to serve this office in this community for the last 4 years as DA. And I've got 20 years of experience as a prosecutor. Again, I've never lost a homicide case, 100% conviction rating. I've been named Homicide Prosecutor of the Year twice in my career, 2015 and 2017. and worked really hard to make sure our problem-solving courts are the best they possibly can. And to do those things effectively, you have to have experience. To have the idea that somebody could come in and be the elected DA without that experience would put us in a bad position.
Thank you. I was trying to hold that off. This question is 30 seconds. We'll start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dow. What experience do you have with budgets?
Thank you for that question. So I mentioned earlier that the budget for the DA's office is just short of $21 million. It's about $20,580,000, something like that. It's important that we recognize first and foremost that that budget is not just created out of thin air. That is taxpayer money. We have to be good stewards of that taxpayer money. We have to be spending it in a way that's responsible for our taxpayers and being fiscally responsible with that money. And as district attorney, we've always been under budget. Some of that is because of employment issues. You know, if you're underfunded, you're going to have a little bit of underspending. But really, managing that budget successfully as DA is important.
Thank you. Candidate Dow.
I serve on the Budget and Finance Committee of my synagogue and also vice president of that synagogue. And so I do have experience being a steward of other people's money. And I think it is important that that is taken seriously and those funds are expended wisely.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. This is a 1-minute question. We'll start with candidate Dow. It's a long question, so bear with me. As a DA of the 4th Judicial District, you must lead not just an office of 250 plus employees, but 2 counties, law enforcement agencies, and in many ways a region. Describe your past leadership and how your vision makes you ideal for this DA's office.
Thank you. So I do believe that the DA, the position of elected DA is a position that requires vision. And sometimes having experience doing exactly, you know, as in this example, being a prosecutor, as Mr. Allen says, for 20 years can lead to tunnel vision rather than a broader vision. So I think it's important to have a broader vision for what the DA's office could be, instead of just putting out fires over and over and over again, which is what it feels like we do. Every day that I'm doing my day job, I have to lead a group of people that are trying to solve some of the most intransigent problems in America. I mean, we're working with families that are dealing with poverty, with substance abuse, mental health issues, and then on top of that, trying to navigate the judicial system. And I work with teams of people that are trying to address those problems on the ground. And I sit in their living rooms with them, and we sit in meetings, and we try to solve basically all of America's problems, one case at a time.
Thank you. Mr. Candidate Allen.
Thank you, ma'am. You know, the DA's office is the chief law enforcement agency in the 4th Judicial District. And why I say that is every single law enforcement agency that we work with, and it's over 23 agencies, whether it's local, like Green Mountain Falls Marshal's Office, or federal agencies like the FBI, ATF, those types of agencies. Everything that they do and is going to result in criminal prosecution flows through the DA's office. And that's why I say we are the chief law enforcement agency in the district. It's important that we have strong leadership in the DA's office, that we have respectful relationships with those other law enforcement leaders. But sometimes we're going to disagree. I've been married for almost 30 years now, and I don't agree with my wife all the time, and she agrees with me even less. And you have to be able to recognize that and move forward and be respectful and have good outcomes. And you do that by building positive relationships. And then another area that I want to share as far as leadership is I was actually recently asked by UCCS Women Leadership Advisory Committee to be on that committee. And when they called me, I said, "Are you sure you want me? I'm not a woman." And they said, "Yeah, we do want you." So I've been doing that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. This question will start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dow. And it's going to be 1 minute. What are your ideas for impacting the school-to-prison pipeline?
Can you repeat it one more time?
What are your ideas for impacting the school-to-prison pipeline?
Yeah, so and do I have 30 seconds, is that what you said?
1 minute.
1 minute. Ultimately, that comes down to a societal question. How are we going to serve all of our communities in the most equal way? Are we giving every single area in the community the same equal opportunities, not necessarily the same outcomes, but the opportunity for outcome? And that requires every aspect of a society to be rowing in the same direction. making sure that disenfranchised schools, disadvantaged areas of our community are given the same chances, the same funding as other areas of the community, so that those kids can have the best opportunity possible. But I'll tell you, one of the strongest indicators of, and most common indicator for men in prison is a lack of fathers in the home. That is a societal issue that society has to tackle collectively. It's not something that the DA's office can mandate or weigh in on. It really requires all of society to make some changes. And until we make those changes as a society, we're going to continue to see issues with kids ending up in systems.
Thank you. Candidate Dell.
Well, this question really hits home for me because I spend a good amount of my time in expulsion hearings in the schools here in our community, where the kids and the family are really being railroaded by the district administration. And I'm in there fighting for these kids, but a lot of times, you know, my hands end up being tied, partly by the charging decisions that the district attorney's office is making in those cases. And I think that they're overly aggressive with the charging when they're charging kids. These kids are in school. They often have some kind of disability, and they're not getting the services they need. And the schools are railroading them and their families, and it's not every time. The one benefit of them being charged with a crime is they get someone like me to be able to sit in that meeting and advocate for them. Every kid facing that should have a lawyer in the room because the schools are not responsibly handling that. The DA's office can impact that by taking a harder look at restorative justice and alternatives to traditional prosecution.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll start with candidate Dow again for this one. It's 1 minute. As district attorney, in what ways would your office work to combat wage theft?
Well, I would have to say that the district attorney's office is limited by the laws of the state of Colorado. So we can't be out there, you know, going after, you know, attacking an issue where there isn't a law that's backing us up. But when it comes to light, that there has been wage theft going on, then the district attorney's office needs to take that evidence seriously and go after it the same they would any other kind of theft, motor vehicle theft, or something along those lines. Wage theft is something that it tends to be considered a white-collar crime, and a lot of times there are far more victims than stealing a car. So I think it needs to be taken absolutely as seriously as any other form of crime.
Thank you. Candidate Allen.
Thank you. So we've actually had to deal with this on occasion. Thankfully, not very often, but we have had to deal with it. Most times, wage theft is most effectively dealt with through the employment function. So if an employer determines that an employee has been logging hours incorrectly or basically stealing time from the company, then the company has ways to go about exercising, correcting that issue. And that can include up to and including termination. They can also potentially keep some of their earned money back when they terminate that employment situation. But if it is something that is a criminal issue, then we are happy to look at that and prosecute it, and we have had to do that on occasion. But again, we have to be driven by the law and the facts of a given case before you jump in with the prosecution effort.
Can I do a follow-up question to that, please? You mentioned, and I'll do 30 seconds, Ms. Joan. I heard white-collar crime, and I also, from one candidate, and I also heard that companies who find an employee. What about the employers who don't allow the 15-minute breaks and the 30-minute required lunch hour? And I'm going to call out a national federal government agency specifically. So what about those people? 30 seconds.
Are you calling out?
How about the United States Air Force Academy?
No.
How about that one?
Yeah. So the United States Air, am I first?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay.
Sorry, candidate, sorry, my bad. Sorry, candidate.
I'm glad you've asked that follow-up question, because I noticed that we did have different interpretations of what wage theft meant. To me, that really did come as a white-collar crime, companies stealing the time of their employees and not adequately compensating for them for that time, or not compensating them at all. you know, if there's a federal issue versus a state issue, then it may not fall within the jurisdiction of the district attorney's office. One thing that leaps to mind really is that just like Mr. Allen has created certain task forces, it occurs to me that wage theft coming from a company toward an employee would go unreported or undiscovered, and so maybe creating a task force to look into that and be a reporting outlet for that.
Thank you, Candidate Allen.
Thank you. So as it relates to the United States Air Force Academy, that's going to be a federal jurisdictional issue, so really it would take a federal agency to look into that. But if there is a crime that's been committed, whether it's an employer or an employee, and the law is clear that there's been a crime committed and there's evidence to support that prosecution effort, then we would look at it just like we would any other particular crime.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start. This question is going to be 1 minute, starting with candidate.
I have one more.
These are the last two questions, so before candidate closing. So start with candidate Allen, followed by candidate Dow. How would you or do you work with community organizations to build trust in the community and interrupt crime before it happens?
Yeah, so we do this all the time. There's a pastors group that I meet with very regularly. In fact, we're hosting that meeting here coming up in the next, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. And it's pastors from all over the community, from all different types of denominational churches. And we come in and talk about impacts to their congregations about, different issues. I go out to schools all the time to talk about impacts of fentanyl or other criminal activity, making sure that kids are being educated about what impacts they may have. One area that we are really successful in is sexting diversion. And that is when kids don't realize the impact of taking pictures of each other or themselves and then sending it amongst other kids, what that lifelong impact can be, and getting them educated as to what that looks like and getting them steered away from getting involved with distribution of child pornography, because at the end of the day, that's really what that is. But really, it's getting out in the community, having town halls, meeting with different groups, engaging in question and answer. If people have concerns, engaging and being willing to listen.
Thank you, candidate Dow.
I agree with the idea of having town halls and getting out into the community. My perspective is somebody who's sat in the living room of people that are facing a lot of these issues and talked with them for hours about these kind of things. But absolutely working with all of the community organizations that want to work with the DA's office to address these issues. But I guess one way that we would differ is I don't believe that the elected DA should be in the courtroom. I believe that politicizes whatever case that the elected DA is working on. And instead of spending that time in the courtroom, I would be out in the community working with community leaders to address that issue particularly.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. This is the last question of the evening. It'll be 1 minute. We'll start with candidate Dow, and it's a long one again, so bear with me. New technologies such as facial recognition, predictive policing, and AI analysis of social media are emerging. Are there ethical issues surrounding these, and how would you handle them?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are ethical issues surrounding these. It would come down to an evidence issue, and the court system is grappling with that as we speak. And so if AI or some other form of policing is overly intrusive, and it is not meeting the evidence threshold that would be required to proceed with the prosecution, then my position would be not to proceed with that evidence as part of the case, or not to proceed with the case at all. But I think also educating the law enforcement community about, the strength or weakness of that kind of evidence would be an important thing in making sure that people's rights are respected.
All right, thank you. Candidate Allen?
So we're actually seeing this a lot. We've had attorneys that have used AI to write motions that are citing things that are not actually laws, case laws, that kind of thing. So it's impacting every aspect of our community. So as it relates to those types of things, we just need to be on guard for them. And then if there are things that are being used by police agencies that are not, maybe they violate civil rights or something like that, then we need to be very careful about how those things are being used. But it's also important to know that criminals are also using AI to really victimize people. I'm actually working on trying to get a law changed as it relates to child pornography. People can take a picture of a child that is a very innocent picture, run it through an AI machine, and then it will put them in a very sexually suggestive or outright sexual situation. And there's no law currently in existence that you can use to combat that type of artificially created sexual imagery. And so we need to change the laws to go after those types of things as well.
Thank you. That is the end of the audience-driven questions. We'll now go in to closing statements in reverse order. So we'll start with candidate Dowell for 2 minutes, followed by candidate Allen.
Well, as I said in my opening statement, I believe that that the district attorney's office can be broader. It needs to focus on prevention to the maximum effort that it can put into that area. It needs to focus on alternatives to traditional prosecution and then reintegrating people through programs to reduce recidivism. And I appreciate that Mr. Allen is a public servant and an experienced prosecutor. But I believe that sometimes, as I said, that can create tunnel vision. And the role of the elected DA is to be a community leader and to have a vision. In much the same way that there may be an experienced ride operator at Disneyland, but they're not necessarily going to run the Disney Corporation. You need a broader vision and a willingness to think outside the box and work with people in the community to collaborate to end some of the problems that we face, which is, as I said, a recidivism problem in this community in particular. We send more people to prison and then send more people back to prison than any other county or any other judicial district in Colorado. And that indicates that there's a policy that needs to change. And it's my position that rather than being in the courtroom, the DA should be out in the community working to address that issue and should lead the office in a way that prioritizes justice over everything else and works to maximize the problem-solving court approach, restorative justice, diversion programs, and creates and expands programs to reduce recidivism. I think that would keep us all safer.
Thank you, candidate Dowell. Candidate Allen.
Thank you. Again, ultimately, it comes down to experience. Experience absolutely matters to be the elected DA and to run a big DA's office like what we have here in the 4th Judicial District. I've dedicated my adult life to public service, serving for 8 years in the United States Navy as an aviation electronics technician, and then once finishing up my Navy career, being in prosecution for the last 20 years. I've been able to work with some amazing people on behalf of the citizens of several communities, and most recently now the last 13 years, this community as a district attorney for the last 4. And Heidi and I raised our kids here. They've gone to school here. One of them still lives here, one's living elsewhere. But this is a way to have tangible impact on a community by being the elected DA and being able to work with great people in service to our community. And ultimately it comes down to, do you have the experience necessary to do this job? And I'll tell you that as district attorney, I've got some really good role models across the state of Colorado. One of which is Michael Doherty, which is the DA up in Boulder. He is a very strong prosecutor, much like what I try to be. He has been a first chair prosecutor on big cases. He's also a Democrat, and he was the lead prosecutor on the King Soopers shooting case, and is not afraid to go into the courtroom to lead his people into towards the sound of battle and to be that voice for victims that can't be there for themselves. That's the DA that I like to be as well, being able to be that voice for victims, and I would be humbled to have your support to do that for another 4 years as your district attorney. Again, my name is Michael Allen, and you can learn more about me on my website, michaelallen4da.com, or just reach out to the DA's office. I'd be happy to talk with anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get a round of applause for our candidates, please? So that wraps up our live and virtual forum for district attorney candidates for Colorado Judicial District 4. Thank you again to our host, IBEW. This location has been amazing. We are so appreciative of your hospitality having us here. Thank you for joining us in person or online for our audience. As previously mentioned, these recordings are available on our League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region website at LWVPPR.org. or on our YouTube channel under Live and on our League's Making Democracy Work podcast. Again, thank you for being an active and engaged citizen. We so appreciate you spending the afternoon with us. Again, thanks so much. See you next time. Oh, Monday. Oh, I'm sorry. I got a couple of announcements. Sorry, my bad. I'm sorry. Thank you, Woody. Go ahead, Mike. Oh, yeah, candidate picture. Don't forget our picture. Sorry, that was it. Yeah, we're going to stay for a candidate picture. But again, thank you, everybody, and let us know if you need anything. We so appreciate you.